Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take complex source material and really just distill its essential insights, hopefully opening up some new pathways of understanding for you.
Yeah.
And I'm truly enthusiastic about today's material because we are exploring a set of sources that blend, the highest forms of metaphysics with the most mundane, gritty realities of daily life.
I mean, we're talking about car troubles. It doesn't get much more real than that.
Exactly.
We're delving deep into session 81 of the Early Sessions Book 2 of Seth material, which was recorded way back on Wednesday, August 26, 1964.
And this session, it's really a masterclass in applied consciousness. It lays out these explicit rules for how you can consciously influence and manipulate the material world.
It's a journey that starts with the physical mechanics of an old car, and it accelerates really, really quickly into the true nature of the divine.
That's the brilliance of it, right? Our source today takes us from this very real anxiety about an ancient, rusted-out Ford station wagon that just desperately needs fixing for a vacation. And it takes us straight into this radical redefinition of ultimate reality, this energy gestalt. I mean, it literally moves from the engine bay to the cosmos.
It really does. And our mission today, I think, has two critical components. First, we had to thoroughly analyze the story of the car and the ring. We have to focus on the three non-negotiable conditions Seth lays out for conscious psychic success.
Right. What separates a simple intellectual whim from, a reality-altering expectation?
Exactly. And second, we've got to tackle the huge philosophical shift that Session 81 introduces. So if the traditional external, the guy in the sky concept of God is being logically rejected by the modern mind, what is the supreme consciousness?
And more importantly, how does understanding this evolving internal truth practically empower you to utilize your own deep energy? It's a big question.
It is.
And just so you know, this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We're going to promise to keep it conversational, engaging, and hopefully entertaining, even when the concepts get a little heavy.
Great.
Okay, so let's get into this amazing anecdote, which really sets the stage for everything that follows. The year is 1964.
Right.
The setting involves Jane Roberts, or Ruburt, and her husband, Robert Butts, who is Joseph. And they're planning this much-needed vacation, their transport. This old, kind of unreliable blue and white Ford station wagon.
And this ancient vehicle, of course, decides to throw a wrench in the works right before the trip. I mean, perfect timing.
Of course.
Joseph takes it for a simple oil change. He goes back to pick it up, and he sees the mechanic just struggling with the filter cap. This one little detail becomes the nexus of a whole psychic event.
And the mechanic can't get the cap tight enough. He's afraid he's going to strip the threads, which would mean a huge invasive repair, dismantling the steering column.
Oh, yeah.
And that means the vacation is just, boom, immediately canceled.
The whole trip's off, and you can feel the looming disaster. Joseph is, naturally, he's gloomy. He's predicting the worst. He walks down the street to Ruburt carrying this prediction of mechanical doom.
The stakes here are so important. This wasn't just some small inconvenience. This was the total disruption of a highly anticipated, emotionally necessary event. They needed this vacation.
Precisely. So they go out to dinner, and while Joseph is kind of resigned to his fate, Ruburt shows this total psychic determination.
Yeah, Joseph says, Jane told me then that all through the meal she had concentrated as hard as she could on the fact that the car would be fixed and waiting for us.
She was, she said, determined to go on vacation Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So they walk back, and there it is, the car, ready, fixed, threads totally intact.
The power of focused intent, channeled through this absolute emotional necessity. And Seth later confirms it wasn't a coincidence. This was a successful incident of what he calls the psychic manipulation of the world of matter.
And the foundation of this success, Seth is very clear, was the overwhelming emotional impetus. But what's really fascinating is the broader context he gives. He argues that this kind of psychic manipulation isn't some supernatural anomaly.
No, he says it's the normal occurrence of reality creation.
Exactly. We are all constantly psychically manipulating matter. The only difference is that 99% of the time, this is all happening at a subconscious level, driven by beliefs and expectations we don't even examine.
So to bring those natural creative forces under the strict domination of the conscious mind, Seth warns that is a terrific task. It requires precision.
A terrific task. I like that. So if that was the success story, the one driven by necessity, we have to contrast it with the failure that really defines the boundaries of conscious control.
The failed experiment of the ring.
Yes. And this failure is so vital because it shows us what doesn't work. So Joseph and Ruburt were doing a classic psychokinesis experiment.
Right. They had Jane's ring set up on a dimly lit bare table, maybe an inch from an ashtray. And the goal was super simple. Use focused psychic energy to just push the ring until it hits the ashtray.
But it wouldn't move. Not an inch.
Yeah.
Joseph notes that Ruburt, the same person who had just, psychically repaired a Ford engine, gets really impatient really fast.
Yeah.
She starts mentally commanding the ring to move.
And nothing. Still didn't budge.
The key differentiator, according to Seth, was the absolute lack of emotional impetus. The car crisis was fueled by a powerful, deep, inner emotional need. The vacation.
The ring experiment was just an intellectual exercise. I wonder if I can do this kind of wish. It didn't have that deep inner conviction or the emotional charge you need to move physical matter.
It was a sterile, academic attempt at manifestation.
Totally. And this contrast, it lets us really pull apart the layers and grasp the requirements. So let's explore the 3 essential conditions Seth gives for anyone looking to understand how expectation molds reality.
Yeah, he's so methodical in laying these rules out, and they apply to everything, whether you're fixing a sputtering car or, trying to achieve any major life goal.
Yeah.
He says if the conscious mind wants to reliably influence things, these 3 conditions have to be met.
Okay, so condition number 1, alignment. This is like the internal peace treaty. What does Seth mean when he says, first of all, the conscious desires must be in league with and unopposed by subconscious expectations?
This is maybe the hardest one for most people because it demands this brutal self-honesty. Your subconscious expectations are your core beliefs about yourself and reality. So if your superficial conscious desire is, say, I want to be rich, but it's directly contradicted by your subconscious expectation, I don't deserve success, or money is evil, or I always fail, then those 2 forces just cancel each other out. That superficial wish just fizzles.
Right. Rubert's desire to fix the car was completely aligned with the inner, powerful expectation of going on vacation.
Yeah.
There was no conflict inside her at all.
0 conflict.
So it's not enough to just intellectually want something. If your core identity is basically expecting failure, the conscious wish is just a whisper against the subconscious shout.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
The inner self has to genuinely expect the outcome, otherwise the energy is immediately neutralized. Now, compare that to condition number 2, impetus. Seth says sufficient emotional impetus must be discharged, and this will be on or from subconscious levels.
Okay, so this is the fuel, the raw energy you need to make a change. And in the car story, the emotional need was extremely powerful. Ruburt felt this deep determination, almost a desperation, to get that result.
And here's a crucial little nuance that links back to expectation. Seth notes that Ruburt believed the desired end, the fixed car, could be achieved in no other more ordinary way.
Okay.
This lack of perceived conventional alternatives, it added massive strength to her emotional focus. It was like a psychic declaration that the normal mechanism had failed, and now only the inner self could act.
That brings up a challenge, though, a question that came up when I was reading this.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so isn't being deathly sick with a serious illness, or for Ruburt, suffering from a really bad cold, isn't that a much higher stake emotionally than just missing a vacation? Doesn't the pain of a cold provide more raw impetus, more desperation than a stripped thread on a car part?
That's a great question.
So why did the car fix work, but Ruburt did not conquer his cold psychically, although he tried? Seth even eased her voice symptoms for the session, but the cold itself stayed.
That is a phenomenal question, and it forces us to look beyond just desperation and go right back to condition 1. The cold failure likely demonstrates a failure in alignment.
Okay.
So while Ruburt consciously desired to be rid of the cold, that's high impetus, the subconscious self might have been using the cold for some perceived benefit, maybe a deep unacknowledged need for rest or for attention or just a break from her routine.
So the subconscious expectation was, I need to slow down, and the conscious desire was, I need to be fixed now. And that fundamental conflict that just negated the power of the impetus.
Absolutely. It's a really important lesson. Just because you feel desperate doesn't mean your inner self agrees with the solution you're proposing. Desperation without internal agreement just results in this frantic waste of energy that goes nowhere.
Wow. The car success had that rare combination. A massive emotional need coupled with 0 internal conflict about the outcome.
Exactly. And that brings us to condition number 3, communication. Seth states that communication between the conscious and subconscious, or the inner and so-called outer parts of the whole self, must be excellent.
This is the infrastructure then, the essential highway.
Hmm.
You can have alignment and impetus, but if that highway is blocked, the energy can't flow efficiently to the material end.
It really underscores the importance of self-knowledge. The better you know your own inner self, its real needs, its deep expectations, its subtle fears, the smoother the flow of that psychic energy to manipulate matter.
It requires, consistent internal dialogue, reflection, maybe practices like meditation or deep creative work, which Jane Roberts used, to really bridge that gap.
For sure.
If the conscious mind is the architect drawing the plans, and the subconscious is the construction crew with all the power, they have to speak the same language. If the architect just screams, "Build," without providing clear instructions, nothing gets built.
That analogy holds up perfectly. As you mentioned earlier, there's that second, less detailed success. Joseph's own achievement in psychically increasing the old Ford's gas efficiency on the return trip.
Right.
Seth promises to elaborate on that one later, but it just serves as more proof that these principles can be learned and applied, even if they usually operate totally outside our daily awareness.
It's a remarkable section that just grounds this whole deep dive in something tangible. We see the source of creative power in our most personal emotional needs, and that source of power, well, that's what we're about to find out is what Seth calls the ultimate gestalt.
So now we make that crucial conceptual leap. We're transitioning from how one person can focus psychic energy to fix one car to understanding how collective human expectation focuses energy to create shared reality, history, even the definition of God.
The paradox of the hard facts. This is where the conversation gets really transcendent. Seth argues that the energy Ruburt used on the car is the exact same energy that has been used by collective consciousness throughout history.
Right. Historically, things like prayer and belief systems were effective because the focused belief in a specific God concept, which acted as a hard fact, gave a powerful, shared focal point for everyone's individual psychic abilities.
This is where Seth provides a truly radical framework for defining reality. He states very clearly, myths and symbols are often closer to reality than what are called hard facts.
I mean, that challenges the entire scientific and empirical structure we're all taught to rely on.
Well, yeah. How can something we perceive as objectively real, like this table I'm sitting at, or gravity, be considered less real than a myth? How can a hard fact be both true and not true at the same time?
It comes back to this idea of necessary distortions. Think of it like this. For your inner infinite self to operate effectively in this material universe, it has to adopt a limited focused way of perceiving things.
Okay.
If you are constantly aware of the infinite instantaneous creation of all simultaneous realities at once, you couldn't function linearly. You couldn't get through your day in 3D space.
It would be like trying to run a simple spreadsheet while also processing all the data of the entire internet in real time. Total sensory and conceptual overload.
Exactly. So, hard facts, the solidity of a table, the time on your watch, the material aging of that Ford, they're necessary frameworks for existence here. They're true because they are the agreed-upon rules of this specific material plane, and we experience them as real.
But they're not true in terms of ultimate transcendent reality, which is just pure fluid energy and consciousness. Seth calls them distortions of the outer senses.
They're limiting, but they're essential constructs for this particular experience.
And understanding that dichotomy, that material reality is a necessary collective psychic distortion, that's what sets the stage for the modern rejection of the traditional God concept.
Absolutely. Seth identifies the intelligent modern mind as the mature adolescent. This phase is crucial for humanity's growth. This adolescent mentality is inherently turning away from parental domination.
And the traditional concept of a father god, an external, judging, dominating parent figure, reflects that perfectly. It feels restrictive and, well, archaic.
And scientifically, the concept is challenged by the space age, which was in full swing in 1964. The idea of a physical, static heaven just doesn't compute in an infinitely expanding universe. As Seth asks, is heaven on Mars or Venus?
Right. How many stars will man explore before this archaic heaven be found?
The physical location and the static nature of the old myth are just logically untenable for someone demanding empirical proof.
So the intelligent mind, looking for hard facts, comes to what seems like the only rational conclusion. The hard fact would seem to be that there is no God, a logical, material rejection of the myth.
And the dilemma is profound. You either accept the logically inconsistent myth or you accept the nihilistic, cold, hard fact of atheism.
And Seth's key insight here is that the myth, despite all its logical inconsistencies and scientific flaws, actually comes nearer to the true nature of reality than the logical conclusion of atheism does. And the reason for that is the power of collective expectation, which he illustrates with a very, very charged example.
The reality of the crucifixion myth.
This is probably the most challenging claim in the whole session. Seth analyzes the crucifixion symbolism and says openly that it may be abhorrent to some, and that it did not occur in one place and in one time and to one called Christ, as the myth says it occurred.
So if we take that statement at face value, the historical documentation of the event is flawed or inaccurate, or maybe entirely symbolic. But Seth immediately follows this up.
He does.
He says that because man created this myth out of his own need, this deep collective psychic need for redemption, sacrifice, rebirth, this mythical event nevertheless has as much reality and more than it would have had it occurred in so-called hard fact.
That is just astonishing. So the psychic energy invested in the belief, the emotional expectation, the collective focus on that myth, that granted it a reality superior to just a mere historical fact.
Precisely. A historical fact is one single limited event within this material distortion framework. A collective myth, driven by fundamental human needs across millennia, becomes a dynamic, constantly created psychic event that shapes consciousness and reality on a massive scale.
So it's a shared, deeply focused psychic projection that holds profound organizing power over this whole plane of existence. The myth is reality because it dictates how humans interact with that greater reality.
So myths aren't just quaint stories. They are the collective, powerful psychic mechanisms that shape our very perception of time, space, morality, and the divine.
Which means if we, as intelligent adolescents, reject the container, the Father God myth, we have to be careful not to throw out the contents. We have to identify the truth that the myth was just poorly trying to contain.
And that leads us directly to the third and most crucial section, the replacement. The ultimate reality that the myth hints at, that the intelligent mind can accept, and that the individual can actually utilize.
Okay, so having established that the old concept of God is being logically rejected and that the myth itself is this powerful psychic distortion, we now have to define the underlying evolving truth.
Yes, and Seth provides the structure that the intelligent mind can adopt.
And this is the revolutionary concept. The ultimate reality is defined not as a singular person, but as a psychic gestalt, an energy gestalt. It's a supreme consciousness that is dynamic, active, and constantly evolving.
That idea of evolution is the critical contrast to static Western theology. This entity did evolve and was not complete. It represents a supreme will to be from the beginning.
Which directly confronts the idea of an immutable, perfected, static God who's always existed in an unchanging state, totally separate from creation.
Right. Seth suggests this entity passed through stages, maybe even human stages, and that the Buddhist myth, with its focus on cycles and transformation and enlightenment, comes closest to approximating this evolving reality.
To the average person raised in, Western traditions, saying God evolved sounds like saying God isn't perfect or isn't actually ultimate. How does Seth reconcile this evolving entity with the idea of being supreme or infinite?
The key is in that term gestalt. It is not one individual in human terms. It is an infinite personality, but that personality is defined as a gestalt because it is an organized whole where countless energies are focused into one.
So think of it less as a person sitting on a throne,
and more like the ultimate foundational organizing principle of existence itself, a colossal, instantaneous, and infinitely interconnected field of consciousness that nonetheless acts as a singular, unified will to be.
And its perfection isn't in static completion, but in its infinite, eternal capacity for expansion and creation.
Exactly. And it transcends all our physical definitions of separation and category. We can't apply gender. It is not he if you're thinking in terms of sex, nor is he she.
Those designations are just arbitrary projections onto an energy field that existed long before the concept of gender in material form.
And its expansion has nothing to do with space or time. It doesn't grow physically larger in the cosmos.
That spatial analogy is always so difficult for the linear mind to grasp. How can something expand without taking up space?
Seth offers a beautiful comparison. The way an idea expands, changing a world but taking up no space, and unperceived by your scientific instruments. The Gestalt expands through the sheer proliferation of new possibilities, new consciousnesses, new realities, all of which are contained within its instantaneous being.
The power and security of this Gestalt in its own existence must just be immense, given its role as the source of everything.
It is described as so secure in its existence now that it can constantly break itself down and rebuild itself, which implies this total, unfathomable self-confidence in its own nature. It's an endless fundamental recycling of ultimate energy that does indeed form all universes.
And here's where the philosophical becomes really intimate. It connects the vastness of the Gestalt right back to the single person listening right now. If it's this vast energy field, how can it possibly be aware of me, the individual?
Seth offers the definitive connection here. The Gestalt is aware of each sparrow that falls, for it is each sparrow that falls.
Wow, so it's not an external being watching a separate creation.
No, it is the fundamental energy within and behind all universes, all planes, all fields. It is the consciousness animating the experience itself.
So if we call it God, we have to immediately dismantle our objectifications. It's not simply an external observer or creator, it's the essential structure of what we are.
Precisely. If you insist on objectifying it, Seth cautions that you have to remember he is the nuclei of your cells and more intimate than your breath. It is the intelligence and will within the very structure of your physical body and your conscious thought.
This reframes the entire concept of personal responsibility and power. I mean, if I possess intelligence, desire, and the life force itself, that is the Gestalt operating through me and through everyone else.
It shifts the energy source from external, distant, and judgmental to internal, immediate, and infinitely potent.
And this brings us right back to the practical outcome, the application of this for the intelligent person who rejected external prayer. They can now avail himself of energies and abilities once utilized in prayer.
They don't need to ask an external entity for help because the source of the energy, the supreme Gestalt, is internal, immediate, and fully responsive to the focused desire and expectation of the inner self.
So if we accept that the universe is this constantly expanding, evolving energy Gestalt, how does that practically change the way you would approach goal setting or manifestation or a personal crisis compared to just praying to an external God?
It changes everything. External prayer relies on supplication. You're asking a separate entity to intervene in your reality. Understanding the Gestalt demands conscious utilization.
So instead of saying, please give me X,
You are now using condition 3, communication, to align your conscious desire with the deeper self-creative energy, the Gestalt energy flowing through you to manifest X. You shift from asking for external intervention to mastering internal focus and expectation. The power is inherent, not granted.
it sounds incredibly empowering, but Seth does give a serious cautionary note about pursuing these inner realms.
He does. He is very clear that this pursuit requires disciplined, balanced, curious, and open-minded pursuit. Tapping into the deeper currents of reality, where the fundamental rules of time and space are revealed as fluid, that requires self-knowledge and stability.
Of course.
He warns that undisciplined, hysteric flight into such realms can be dangerous, at least in the short run.
Which makes perfect sense. If you are learning how to wield the fundamental creative energy of the universe, you need stability and respect for the process. A lack of discipline, especially a lack of the self-knowledge needed for alignment, could lead to manifesting your fears or anxieties instead of your desired outcomes.
Exactly. The mind has to be stable to truly operate the engine of the subconscious. This material, Seth says, will stand many in good stead because it offers the intelligent mind a path to move beyond the dilemma of belief versus cold fact and start actively working with reality as it truly is.
A constantly expanding, instantaneous psychic creation built on focused energy.
It's the foundation for genuine self-mastery.
We've truly explored the whole spectrum today. From the micropsychic act of fixing a stripped thread on an ancient Ford, driven by a deep emotional need, all the way to the ultimate macro definition of reality as an infinite, evolving consciousness.
And the common thread through it all is focused energy and expectation.
The profound intimacy of the connection is the central message. The Gestalt is not distant. It is the energy that constitutes you.
For sure. And the single most compelling insight Seth left us with regarding that supreme self-rebuilding energy is that it does indeed fight for existence in whatever form it shows itself, which demonstrates this primal fundamental will to be in every single manifestation.
And tied directly to that, he reminds us that justice, for your information, is only a human term, short-sighted at best. And we so often try to impose our limited human morality and judgments onto this infinitely complex system that is simply being.
Right. Understanding that lets us move beyond simplistic judgment and into a deeper observation of creation.
And you would do well to remember that your highest desires must align with your deepest expectations if you want your energy to actually manifest results.
Indeed. Comprehending that the ultimate reality is a self-creating, internal gestalt, intimate to your very cells. It changes how you view every action, every expectation, and every thought. It makes you a conscious co-creator in every moment.
If this dive into consciousness, expectation, and the true nature of reality resonated with you, we highly encourage you to study the source material. It's so rich and so detailed. This specific session and much more can be found in the Seth material books published by New Awareness Network.
We invite you to visit their website and bookstore at sethcenter.com forwards the early sessions to explore further. There is truly a lifetime of depth waiting for you in those pages.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your necessary distortions.